I think writers have always been king. They've just never been given the respect they deserve. Now they're going to get it.
So tell me about a roadmap forwards for the little guys, because a lot of people are interested in that. So for a guy like me with my movie, or somebody with an idea, what are the kind of things we should be focusing on now? What are the skills we should be developing now? What are the steps we ought to be taking now to kind of move forwards from enthusiasm and ideas to finished product?
Well, I mean, look, the reality is, it's cliche to say, but it's the truth. Storytelling at its fundamental core has not changed for human beings in thousands of years. Our desire to deconstruct it or come at it from different perspectives is always there, and has certainly grown as our intelligence has grown as a species. But it really still comes down to, have you got a good story to tell? No one wanted to show up to watch your play in ancient Greece if the word of mouth was bad. And no one's going to come and watch your traditional movie if the word of mouth is bad. Joker too. And no one's going to watch your AI-powered feature film or show or whatever, or podcast or whatever you're making with it if the word of mouth is bad. So, really, when it comes to the kinds of stories we want to tell and how we get to tell them, what does the little guy do? My advice there is sort of the same. It's like, I think pick something thematically that you believe in. Like, before you come up with a plot, this is my personal approach.
Right.
What I normally start out with is that I kind of imagine a thematic question, put it at the center of the imaginary table. And in this case, it was, how do you know when it's time to grow up? That was really what I was trying to talk about. Because I was at a point in my life, a few things were happening. I was starting to feel like, I'm nearly 40. I still, staying slightly chubby, keeping the wrinkles out. But, I got to a place in life where I was like, I feel like the sort of trappings of youth have really fallen away. And, I do think, especially the film industry, we live in a sort of state of arrested development to some degree, where we're kind of trying to push away those grown-up trappings in favor of this following the dream.
Right.
And another thing had happened, my partner had had a miscarriage. Oh. And so there was an element of being like, I think I'm ready to be a dad. I think I've got to a place in life where I think that's what I want from life. I now am, by the way. I have a beautiful 2-year-old son. He's the best. And so I started out with, okay, when do you know it's time to grow up? And then what I always do is I imagine I'm having a dinner party and I'm inviting 12 guests. And the 12 guests all have radically different opinions to one another. And then they're going to sit around this table and I'm going to say, okay, tonight's topic is, how do we know when it's time to grow up? Go. And then I imagine the argument around the table. And then I pick the top 4 or 5 arguments about when do you know it's time to grow up. And I'm like, those are my main characters.
That's a great way of developing a story.
But I don't know what the plot is yet. I just have a theme. And I have characters. And so for this film, it became, Crew is the sort of, has these dreams. He's been handed what, on the surface to him feels like a legacy that he doesn't want, like a family lineage that he just isn't for him, and he kind of resists growing up and accepting that might be part of him. It doesn't have to be all of who he is, but it's certainly part of him. And then I was like, okay, what's another argument? Well, maybe you're somebody who just refuses to grow up. And that becomes number 4.
Okay.
Number 2, although he's a dog, has a very specific arc. He's somebody who has really accepted growth. And so much so that he's able to now very pragmatically overcome his programming and grow at will.
Right.
And so these become these arguments, and each of them have their own thematic questions within them. Like, what's the price of freedom? What am I giving up? What am I, but they all really are like subcategories of the argument around that dinner table.
Right.
And that's how I get there. And then I always pick the ending by saying, okay, which of these 5 arguments do I agree with? Because the one I agree with is my protagonist, and it's also the ending of my script. If I do a good enough job, you might agree with number 4 more than you agree with Crew, because the argument was made and you're like, well, I see what Crew was saying, but I agree with 4. And I've seen a few reviews now being like, I kind of agree with number 4. And I'm like, okay, cool, we did a good job.
Right, right.
And so that's how I like line up a story thematically, and then I graft plot onto that. I go, okay, well, what interests me? I love science fiction, I love robots. I always dreamed of making a Star Wars film about droids. So I was like, okay, let's go there. That feels like the right story plot device to tell this thematic journey I want to go on in. That does not change whether you're using traditional stuff, whether you're using...
Absolutely.
It's the same. Like
Absolutely.
AI is just the vehicle in which I told that product in, and the vehicle in which we tell all our products in. But this really opens up like some interesting opportunities, I think, for creators. You know, as a writer, you've been told for 40 years, don't put direction in your script. That's the director's choice. You don't say camera goes here or this does that. No, it's frowned upon. Well, in the era of AI, that script that's sitting in front of us on the floor that you wrote, that is a 100-page analog prompt to give to a crew who will go and analog prompt it into existence by building things and putting stuff out and carving it. In the AI era, in the intelligence age that we're now entering into, that prompt serves a very different purpose. And you as the writer will change how you approach writing a script. I want your direction. I want your vision. I want you to tell me how you see this playing so that this team can execute the writer's vision accurately, or so that you can execute it yourself. And that is the world we're heading into. I think writers have always been king. They've just never been given the respect they deserve.
Right.
Now they're going to get it.
See, they just flash this around again. And tell me, I want to ask you about, you said your background was VFX.
Sure.
But the script writing element was clearly solid. To me it was. I looked at it and I'm like, oh, that somebody knows what they're doing there. Would you now see yourself as more of a VFX person or a story writer? Or do you feel as though it's all starting to blend?
Look, I think it's all been blending for a long time. You know, like I could just say, hey, you're just a YouTube presenter. But actually, this afternoon I've watched you set up lights, configure camera settings, test your sound. You'll go home and you'll edit this, you'll mix it, you'll color grade. Like, you know, in today's society, and well, not just today's, all of human history, generalists often outperform niche specialists. And specialists are important. Specialists open the door for generalists to come and innovate. A specialist designed an LLM so that a generalist could go and do some of the things that you're now seeing get out there. And, you know, a specialist invented the camera, but did not know how to direct the movie.
Right.
And like, I think in this day and age, you know, we live in a world where access to information is so available now. You know, human beings are really, as a species, all the amazing things we've accomplished is about networking. It's like how we have networked information together. And artificial intelligence represents the next frontier of that networking of information. But it's the next stage in a process that's been going on for thousands of years. Whether that was, establishing trade routes, swapping of culinary ideas, all this stuff, right? I feel like, how to put this? The reality of being a generalist in today's day and age is you have access to all of this information.
Right,
and if you use artificial intelligence, you can level up, whatever your IQ is, you can level that up.
Right.
Okay, so now you can compete on a real level that perhaps your economic background would have prevented you from 10 years ago.
Right.
Maybe you come from a council estate in Birmingham. Maybe the education system there isn't as good as it should be. Maybe you weren't privy to the same level of teaching that somebody in Surrey would have got. Mm-hmm. That maybe don't have access to the same materials and books and all of this stuff, right? The intelligence revolution that is happening right now levels that playing field. Which is why I think there's a degree of classism to the anti-AI crowd. Throughout all of human history, every time technology is invented, without fail, the working class lose out one way or another.
Right.
That's just a fact, right? Where were the anti-AI crowd when all the supermarkets replaced the checkout ladies or the checkout guys with automatic tills? Where were they on Twitter then? Where were they when the train stations swapped out the guards for automatic scanning things? Where were they then? The difference with artificial intelligence is, this is the first piece of technology that comes along and says, hey, you came from a certain place, which gave you access to a certain level of intelligence. Access to intelligence is different to actual intelligence.
Okay, right.
Right, and that gives you the ability to kind of jump steps on the ladder and get yourself into places where you can study for a degree. And I'm not taking away the hard work that people put in.
Yeah,
and
sure.
The white collar jobs that exist where people have worked extremely hard, things like lawyers and accountants and all these kinds of jobs that we kind of associate with high level wages. Those people have worked hard, no doubt. But for the most part, they also had access to intelligence that might have been completely neglected in areas just north of Hull or just outside
right.
of Manchester. And here's a piece of technology that levels the playing field. I now have access to intelligence, no matter where I come from. And all of a sudden, it's the devil. This has to be stopped. This has to be put back in its box. This has to be controlled. And I see this as a classist play to maintain the status quo. Here is the first opportunity the arts has ever had, really, to put its money where its mouth is. So everyone's talking about, we want to give voices to storytellers from places that we've never heard of. We want to hear unique voices. But actually, all we get is this token nonsense where it's like, we let so-and-so from Leeds make a film. So that's fine, we've covered that. Now we'll just go back to making the same stuff we've always done. AI says, I don't need your permission. Like that filmmaker from Leeds, that filmmaker from Botswana, that filmmaker from Johannesburg, that filmmaker from Malaysia, no longer needs anybody's permission to tell that story in the voice that they want to tell it in. And I think that should be applauded. I think that as a community, we should be screaming and shouting for that. And we should be building economic infrastructure around this new form of telling stories from places that we've never heard of at whatever scale that storyteller wants to tell it at. And so for someone to come to me and say, well, I don't like this and I think we should put it back in the box and don't you think this is affecting so-and-so? Like, this is a classic Wrath of Khan scenario. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And I'm not somebody who believes that we should stunt progress in favor of the needs of the few. I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to retrain. You're going to have to level up because this is not a technology that affects the film industry. It affects all industries from all corners of the globe. It's time to step up and start admitting that. That's all I've got. There you go. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
The writing bit.
Sure.
As you learned the skills of writing, coming from a VFX background, to become a skilled screenwriter, it takes time to study storytelling, study screenwriting. What was your journey? Where did you start? What brought you to this point?
I guess a lot of, sort of nearly 40-year-olds will probably say they saw Jurassic Park as a kid and it blew their mind. And for me, that really started a love of storytelling and visual effects, always hand in hand. At first, I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist, and then I realised that playing in the dirt's not for me.
Right.
It was really the storytelling that I loved. And I'm an armchair philosopher as well. I love talking about, the nature of things and reality and why people are the way they are. And,
right. Great screenwriters are really students of human nature.
Yeah, and I think that, I grew up in a pub, in a bar. That's what my parents did. And so, very young, I'm surrounded by all these people from different walks of life. The pub itself was split into two unique halves, very working class. And then there was a lounge, which all the local teachers would use after work. So, a very educated class of people. And then a group of people who I really admired and worked extremely hard, but hadn't had the opportunity to education that I think my area neglected to provide. And I found that super interesting, all these different perspectives on life and, where did this guy's life go wrong? Where did her life go right? How did that person get there? And, I think as I entered my teenage years, I got very into comic book drawing and kind of trying to come up with stories that would prop that up. And then I knew early on I wanted to be a filmmaker. That was, something that was very apparent to me.
Your ideal team of 9, and you could argue probably that they are already ideal, but just in case, would you prefer them to be generalists or specialists?
In the age of artificial intelligence, I think that having generalist capabilities, but everybody specializes in one area. So, a specific knowledge base,
right,
but an ability to apply it generally is really what you're looking for.
Right. Right.
And that includes myself as well. Like I have this sort of like very opinionated take on theme, and when we were having discussions on the movie, some incredible ideas would come up, and the only time I would veto them is if I would say that is off theme. We have gone off theme.
That takes an incredible amount of laser focus to stay anchored to the theme.
Yeah, but I think that is essentially, a director's job. Yeah. In my opinion, a director's job is to talk to the writer if they weren't the writer.
Right,
If they weren't the writer, it's to talk to the writer and really get on a page, what were you trying to say? And, from my perspective, like solid theme, and you could argue against this, but I could sit here and debate this till the cows come home. I think that all of the classics, the films that resonate, the stories that resonate, the books that resonate, the comics that resonate, they have one very specific thematic question in mind, and they're razor focused on discussing it. And they're
right,
and that is in and they do it in a very generalist way.
Right.
But the focus on theme is there, and your job as a director is really to get on the page with the writer. What are you asking? And a theme should never be a statement. A theme should never be power corrupts. Boring.
Right.
A theme should be, why does power corrupt? Interesting.
Right.
And so me and the writer need to get on the exact same page. What are we asking? And then every shot, every angle I pick, every prop that I choose, every design that we look at, every location we go to, the reason for choosing it should be, why does power corrupt? What does this say about that? And if it doesn't say anything, then even if it's beautiful, even if it's great, even if it's funny, it does not belong here.
Right. That takes a will of steel to be able to do that, I would imagine.
You have to kill your babies sometimes. Yeah, unfortunately, you might look at, there's plenty of things inside this movie that it was longer at first. It was an hour and 40 minutes. And there was some real funny belly laugh stuff with crew learning his skills as a farmer and adjusting to his place on the planet. And, really those like toddler years were covered.
Right.
And thematically, although we loved them, I knew in my heart, I was like, they do not belong here. They are not saying anything about growing up. They're here to entertain, not to discuss stuff. And so we cut them out.
Right.
Because you have to.
Oh, well done. That's how you'll end up succeeding. Because that's really hard to do.
Yeah, it is.
It's really hard to do.
But it's the right thing to do. Every time I've never done that in my career, I've ended up with oh God, please don't watch that kind of moment.
We've kind of covered it, but just to go back, because this is very specific to people who do tune into the channel. Tell me about the tools.
Everything when we approached this film was simple. It was like, AI has to be the core tool, and then you can use a traditional tool to prop it up, but not the other way around. It can't be a traditional tool being propped up by AI. It has to be AI first. So artificial intelligence motion capture, Wonder Dynamics. Okay, fine. Now we can use traditional assets, but we'll texture them with AI, and then we'll load them in, and then we can look at transferring properties over to the same stuff in Blender. But everything has to be generative. Skies, everything is led with this generative AI approach to it. So when people say, oh, well, it's not really AI, I'm like, yes, it is. Like, and sure, I don't mind. If you want to, if it makes you sleep better at night to feel that way, that's cool. I actually don't have anything to prove in that respect. What I know is a team of 9 people in 90 days made something that you could compare to something that is currently out in cinemas that took 4 years and $90 million to get to something that, although straight up is a better movie. No way. There's no way around it. The film in question that I'm hinting at is a better film than Where the Robots Grow. But we did this in 90 days. And okay, if you were that big studio, why not do what we did? Why not then do it again and again and again until you iterate to the perfect film? We could have done that. We chose not to. It's not our model. It's not what we're looking at economically. We're much more focused on that fusion of game world and creator economic mentality. But somebody else could have. You could have took a year and iterated until you got a version of the film that's the one I really wanted. It's just not the kind of filmmaker I am.
In theory, you can start to customize your movie for local cultures. There's a lot of noise for the last couple of years about Disney being great fun for the liberal left, but no fun for the conservative right. Now, that's just an example. I'm not championing one or the other. I'm imagining a Disney with two versions of the same story that goes left and right. And then they don't have to worry about people being upset with them anymore.
But look, I guess, yes, you're right. There's very much, and I'm sure that studios will either adopt that or emergent studios like we are will come out of the woodwork with that as their exact approach. I believe in what we discussed earlier. If thematically you're just trying to talk about something human, then the reality is everybody from all walks of life should understand what you're trying to say. Right. I could have made a politically engaged Where the Robots Grow or a technologically engaged Where the Robots Grow, but instead we just talked about growing up, and it doesn't matter where you come from on the planet or what your political leanings are. That is something you'll have to go through.
Right.
And so in that respect, I think the ability to tell cross-border stories, like I said earlier, I truly believe that editing specifically is the only universal language that exists. So I think we already can cross those borders. In terms of language translation and, localization of specific elements, when it comes to like product placement or, things like cultural references that might be offensive in one region and not in another, then yes, AI will absolutely play a part in helping filmmakers reach a wider audience by localizing the products that they're making. But it really will come down to each studio, whether that's an approach that they want to take or not. But what I can tell you for certain is traditional filmmakers out there, if you think that you live in a world where right now you make a product and it's your vision and that's all it is, and then you put it in the marketplace and no one touches it, you're already wrong. Because you'll sell your film to a sales agent, and your sales agent will take it to Cannes, and then in Cannes they'll sell it off to all these different territories, and they will give each territory the right to cut stuff out, remove things, add stuff, change the title. Your film is already being tampered with at the local level all over the planet, and very few filmmakers on earth have the clout to prevent that from happening. So at least AI will make it your choice. You will get to choose.